At age 14, I was sitting in Peoria Junior High, like all the other children there, and my principal came to class and asked me to leave with him, and he escorted me to the teacher's lounge. Inside the teacher's lounge was two Peoria detectives. They asked me were I willing to talk to them. I said no. Then they convinced me to talk to them anyway. They said they was there trying to solve a homicide dealing with my friend James and his sister Connie. I was there in their home on January 17th. They were murdered on January 18th. Polygraph examiner, in the middle of a polygraph examination, began to say, "You're a murderer, you're a liar." So the polygraph examination never was completed. So subsequently, those things played a factor in breaking my will and coerced me into making a confession. A confession that had no details, no facts. It was just I wanted them to stop, and they wouldn't stop.
That's why it's so easy to get children to falsely confess. I mean, all you have to do, even just allude to them, which may not be illegal, that just parrot back what I'm telling you, and you can get out of here. I mean, you trust the police, right? And if they're giving you that idea, why wouldn't you trust the police? They're never good. And why would you think that if you parrot back your words that you know are not true, could ever result in you going to prison for the rest of your life? I mean, it doesn't make any sense to a 14-year-old.
The judge elected to sentence me to 50 to 100 years in Illinois Department of Corrections. I went to bed every night, every day, with transcripts on the floor, transcripts on the table, police reports, law books everywhere. You know, trying to understand, forensic scientists trying to understand what took place with me because it didn't make sense.
Johnny had been denied access to the evidence that could prove his innocence for 25 years.
My first petition for clemency was in 1979. It was done in juvenile. My next clemency was done in 1993. The first statute for DNA testing was so shallow, they didn't even want to honor it. So the law had to be rewritten, and it was rewritten under People versus Savory. William Hokeridge went against his fellow colleagues and stated that I should have received the DNA testing, that I had put forth material relevance to my innocence, but the other two justices elected not to. So in his dissenting opinion, he rewrote how the DNA statute should look. And the Supreme Court agreed with his dissenting opinion, yet it freed everyone else for DNA testing, but it closed the door on me.
I like to refer to it as almost like this abyss of injustice.
There has never been an innocent person to ever come out of the Peoria, Illinois, in the history of its existence.
I saw this article in the paper, our newspaper. It talked about this young man, and he kept saying that he was innocent of this crime. Her name is actually Octavia, but it had Marie Burchett, and I didn't even know who Marie Burchett was. And so I called her and asked her about this crime that had been committed.
She raised money for him, and they also formed a group called the Concerned Citizens for Criminal Justice. That's how that got started, was my mom. And she was very passionate about that because she saw a lot of our youth getting railroaded into, you know, bad things and didn't have no money to pay for it.
There's no exaggeration, but I believe I wrote a couple of 100,000 letters. Truly, I wrote every prominent organization and person who I thought could help me get my life back.
It was just amazing the lengths he and his advocates had gone through to just get access to the truth, just get access to the evidence. He had letters from 250 kind of who's who Illinois lawyers that would sign it, asking the prosecutors in Peoria County to just agree to give them the evidence, and he would test it at his own expense. And and everyone said no.
My next clemency was done in 2003, and it was just ruled on, based on actual innocence, it was just ruled on by Governor Quinn in December of 2011. He denied it. The day has arrived. It was, I don't think words can contain how I felt, the joy, the happiness of finally to bring this to a closure so I can have my life back, at the same time give closure to the victim's family.
Preliminary results are showing blood on the knife that may very well be testable, and if that blood type proves not to be the victim's, even sure it has her blood type, but a lot of people have that blood type. If it proves not to belong to her DNA, it's a very, very powerful evidence that Johnny is not responsible for this crime. They don't have the murder weapon. I think I've thought, frankly, a lot more about the results if they are not probative, if we don't get any results, how I'd feel about that. And it would just be, I think I'd be heartbroken. Like, I don't know how I would be able to I can't even begin to think about how that conversation with Johnny, and it would be really frustrating. And that's, not to be negative, but that's probably overwhelms my thoughts.
I'm Steve Drizzen from the Northwestern University School of Law's Center on Wrongful Convictions. Johnny's case was somewhat of an infamous case. It was a case involving a 14-year-old boy who was convicted of a double murder in Peoria. And there were a number of legal opinions that were generated from Johnny's case that I had read over the years. I was stunned by a number of things. First of all was the lack of any real hard evidence against Johnny. Lack of any physical evidence, lack of any evidence that really corroborated statements that Johnny had given, just how thin this case was, and how the jury had convicted him on the basis of so little evidence.
Step by step, evidence by evidence, piece by piece, he was convicted in this case on his own words, on the physical evidence, and on the circumstances of this case. And court after court has said so. This case is a collection of evidence, some of it physical, some of it verbal, some of it circumstantial. The physical evidence, the disarray of the house, the dispute in food prepared in the kitchen, the long belated argument over a blood spot on some pants found at the defendant's home, a knife with blood found at the defendant's home, a witness who claimed that shortly after the murders, a knife fell from Johnny Savory's pocket.
I think it's a fabrication. I think that they were desperate to gain a conviction, and they manipulated the evidence to make it seem like Johnny was guilty, when in fact there is no evidence of his guilt.
Here's the reality of the supposed knowledge of the crime scene. Alright, since the beginning of the investigation, Johnny unequivocally stated that he had gone to the home of the victims the night before the murder occurred to hang out with his best friend, James Robinson. When he told investigators that they had eaten corn and hot dogs and then rearranged the living room to practice karate. Now, because the home was still found in the same arrangement that Johnny described, and because the coroner found corn in the stomach of both the victims, the officers simply assumed that Johnny must have lied about the time when he came to their home. They hypothesized that instead of coming the night before, he must have simply arrived the morning of. And in this way, they were able to say that the information he gave them was knowledge that only the true perpetrator of the crime would know. First of all, the pants in question belonged to Johnny Savory's father. Now, at the time, Johnny Savory's father was about 5 foot 10 inches and weighed approximately 250 pounds. Johnny Savory at the time, who was 14 years old, was about 5 foot 2 inches and weighed only 110 pounds. So, I mean, the idea that he could even fit into these pants is ludicrous. But what is even more astonishing is that the blood type found on the pants was type A negative, which was actually the same blood type as Johnny's father. The blood type of the victim was A positive. Now, the most shocking part is that when the prosecution presented this evidence at trial, they stated that the blood type found on the pants and the blood type of the victim were both type A. The blood spots on the knife were so minute that testing couldn't even be performed. Moreover, there was a documented explanation as to why there had been blood spots on the knife. Johnny's father had sustained a deep leg injury while he was at work. Coincidentally, while he sustained this leg injury, he was wearing the same pants that Johnny allegedly wore to the crime scene, which is the explanation for why there was blood on the pants in the first place. At trial, Johnny's father stated that he used this knife to cut the stitches that were used to sew together the leg wound. And finally, another important thing to remember is that the blade of this pocket knife was only 3 inches long. And that's important because the coroner's report distinctly states that there were stab wounds found in one of the victims that were more than 4 inches deep.
These witnesses surfaced at Johnny's second trial. Their testimony was viewed as incredible and unreliable by prosecutors in the first trial. But in order to convict Johnny in his second trial, they brought these victims, these witnesses, into court and used their testimony to convict Johnny. And 2 of the 3 of these witnesses have since recanted their testimony.
They've hid for so long and covered it up. And now that it's out there, and it really won't be of any surprise to a lot of people because they all know that this young man didn't do it.
As you journey with faith, nothing else, you are shaped into an instrument that either will protect life or destroy life. If I allow it to take life, then to me they won because they would have made me into what they tried to portray me as. But then there's the spiritual side to it, that to be chosen for something such as this that would literally free hundreds of people, you understand that you were given something special to share with the world.
Johnny has had the strength of character, the fortitude, if you will, the unmitigated gall to go after and round up the rest of the innocent persons that have felt hopeless and voiceless and speechless. Johnny is a living testament and a walking hope. And he's brought many of those persons around that felt dejected, rejected, and had a sense of hopelessness. He's given them hope.
Johnny has become one of the strongest advocates for the wrongfully convicted in the United States.
He's been a champion for truth and integrity and justice, and so he's revitalized the hearts and souls of so many that have given up. So for that, I'm truly appreciative, respectful, and look up to him.
And I hate to tell you this, but I'm going to tell you anyway. I don't know what it's like to feel like a victim. I'm not a victim. So please don't look at me and feel sorry for me. I was a warrior and a survivor, able to overcome any situation given to me because the grace of God takes care of all that.
The most important pieces of evidence that need to be tested were never the subject of any motions for DNA testing before, and they include hairs that were found underneath the fingernails of both James Robinson and Connie Cooper. Johnny has a clemency petition that's been pending before the governor for years now. It's pending before Governor Blagojevich for years. He did not act on it. Now it's the province of Governor Quinn. And before he rules on that petition, he should order this testing, because the results of this testing could enable him to do what needs to be done in this case, what must be done in this case, which is to pardon Johnny Lee Savory on grounds that he is innocent.